Okay, so we're back with our last part of class. And we found out that many people were having the HTML tags just show up rather than being interpreted. So to fix that, we've changed the content type, which I probably should have done in the first place. Our content type shouldn't really be text plain because our response is actually an HTML response. So we're going to use text/HTML charset UTF-8. And that should fix the fact that for many of our users that the H tags were being displayed as literal text rather than actually rendering as proper HTML formatting. So thanks for bringing that up, Rebecca, and everybody else letting me know that that was not working for you. So yes, we should be using text HTML. So the last thing we want to do with our calculator, and we want to make sure, again, it won't work if you have no URL parameters. So if you just call it this way, we get undefined because there is no subtotal value. So in order to call this properly, we would need some kind of subtotal. But as we mentioned before the break, we need to format these as currency, and that also includes rounding to 2 decimals. So we're going to use an NPM package for this. So I'm going to hit Control-C. I need to stop my server so that we can install a package. So the package we're going to use is called accounting. It is a number, money, and currency formatting library. Cool, that's exactly what we need. Tiny JavaScript library, lightweight, has no other dependencies, so it's not going to install any other packages. So we're going to install this one. We don't need globally. We only need it in this project. We don't necessarily need it for all our node projects. So I'm going to run this command, this npm I accounting. So in my command prompt, I'll type npm I accounting, and then we can examine the changes that this makes. I'll put this in the chat as well. This is going to make a few changes to our project. So we're not installing this one globally. We're going to install accounting. It added one package, so no sub packages. And now we're going to notice 2 changes in the project. Number 1 is we now have a node modules folder. So node modules gets created anytime we install an NPM package. If it's installed locally for this application only, it gets added to the node modules. So this is like the dependencies folder in a Visual Studio project. Doesn't list the global dependencies, but any local dependencies are here. The other thing we're going to see if I open package.json is it's automatically added a dependencies section. It added my accounting, and it says what version. So at least 0.4.1 or higher. So this project requires this dependency. So now we want to use this accounting dependency, this accounting package, in our tax.js. Okay, so I didn't add the folder. I didn't add the code to package.json. Just running npm I, it does those things for us. So if we want to use this file, we can require it just like we did with the built-in libraries. So now we want to link the accounting npm package we added to the project to format the currency values. So typically the standard is, whatever the package name is called, unless the package name is really long, which some of them are, we just create a variable with the same name. So our package is called accounting. So I'll create a constant that's got the same name. So we'll just add that reference before our anonymous asynchronous function. And then inside this library, if I go back to the npm page for the accounting package, it's got some documentation right here, and there is a method called format money. So we want to wrap our subtotal, tax, and total values in the format money function of the accounting library. So down here, when we output them, I'm going to use the format money function and just wrap my subtotal inside. I'll try this out before I do it with tax and total. So I'm just going to go back to my terminal. Now we had to stop the server in order to install the package. So I'll just use nodemon. I want to restart my server, again, watching for changes. So now my server's active again. So I've modified line 31. And now if I go back, it's added currency formatting to my subtotal. So it seems to be working. So I now want to modify line 32 and 33 in the same way. I just want to wrap my values inside of I want to pass each one through the format money function so that they're formatted. So I'm going to call accounting.formatMoney. So we're going to wrap all three of our numeric values in format money, and we should be good. Right? So now everything's rounded to 2 decimals, and it uses the local currency format. So for example, if we were in Japan and my operating system regional settings were set to Japanese, this would give me the yen symbol, for example. So it's based on the regional settings of the server in terms of what we get for currency. If we had regional settings in India, we'd get a symbol for rupees. So we've used this library, pretty simple to install, right? We ran npm I and the package. We linked to it by requiring it. And then we had access to the functions inside the package. So our file is done. Now there is a warning that comes with npm, using npm. We'll talk about it in next week's class, probably a good story to tell, kind of a crazy story. I'll tell it at the beginning of class next week rather than at the end. So one other thing I'm just going to show you guys. This is all the coding we're going to do for today. I'm going to push this up to GitHub in just a second. Before I do, I want to point something out. Much like with Visual Studio, when we created a project in Visual Studio, we got a Git Ignore file. So when we pushed our .NET project to GitHub, the Git Ignore, it ignored all of the dependencies. Now with this project, it's pretty common with Node that our Node modules, as we expand this project, Node module is going to get really large. We don't need to upload all the dependencies to GitHub, right? The package.json will track them. So before I if I push my changes to GitHub now, it's going to include the Node modules folder and my accounting dependency. I don't want to upload all my dependencies into my GitHub project because I just want package.json to keep track of them. So before I push this, I want to add a Node-specific Git Ignore file to my project. You don't have to do this, but it's a good idea. So where do I get the Node-specific Git Ignore file? Well, I've actually put it on Blackboard here in the lesson 2 folder. I've also put it in the tools and resources. So I'm going to download a copy of this file first before I push to GitHub. So this way my node modules gets ignored. So this file is direct from GitHub itself. This is the node git ignore file. So it will ignore a bunch of log files. And one of the other things it ignores is it ignores anything in node modules. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the raw, and I'm going to save a copy of this file into my project. You don't have to do this, but I haven't done it in the past and I really should. So I'm going to go into my winter 21 and I'm just going to call the file .gitignore and save it as all files. So then when I push my changes, it's not going to include the node modules folder. I'm going to save this file. I can see it now in my project. So now if I push my changes to GitHub, my node modules should get ignored. So now I'm going to stop my server, add all my files, and commit and push. So this is lesson 2.3, format with accounting NPM. So now I'm going to upload everything we've done today, and the git ignore should prevent the node modules from being uploaded. Yeah, exactly. That's why, Nick, that's exactly right. The NPM, the node modules gets big, all the dependencies. And sometimes we install an NPM package and it has a whole bunch of other sub-dependencies. So it gets massive. So we should be using git ignore, best practices. I haven't been doing it in the past with this class, which is a mistake on my part. So if I open up my Git repository now, right? So I've uploaded, committed, but I don't have node modules. If I show you my project from last year, you can see by the end of the semester just how big it got. Because I didn't take the time to add this last year. So my node modules were here. And there's two issues. Not only does my node modules get big, like this is all the stuff that got installed. So the repository gets really big, but then the other problem is, because my repository is public for everyone to see, some of these node modules, they get out of date and they have known vulnerabilities. And then GitHub starts sending me notifications saying, this dependency buried somewhere deep in your project, you have this public dependency with a vulnerability. So using the git ignore, it removes that. So you should be using the node git ignore. Again, it's here. It's in the lesson 2 folder. It's also available for you at any point. When you create, it's in tools and resources. And even when you create your repository, you could choose the node git ignore. Just to make sure you do a pull before you push to add the git ignore to your local copy. It's kind of too late for me to do that because I created my repository last week. Okay, so it is down here as well. So you should use it before you push to GitHub. Make sure you add that git ignore so your node modules do not get copied and you don't get this mess. like I had in last year's class. Yep, you can use ESLint, Nick. We can even talk a bit more about that next week. Absolutely. We're also gonna look at some of the coding styles around Node. So ESLint is a good. I'm not super familiar with it, but I've looked at it a bit. I'll look at it some more before next week's class, so you can remind me about that next week if I forget. Or even send me an email and say, "Hey, Rich, let's talk about ESLint next week." That'd be great. I appreciate the suggestion. Yeah, excellent. All right, everybody, that's it for today. I will upload the videos when they're done processing. Code is on GitHub. There's no lab this week. I've changed the due date. I will assign the rock, paper, scissors lab next week. We're going to do a little bit of a JavaScript refresher before I give you that lab as well. So no homework this week, no quiz. Have a great week. I will see most of you on Monday for Project Studio. Okay, thanks everyone. I will stick around in the WebEx room for a little bit in case anybody needs help.